In Greek traditions, a man named Callisthenes, a humble farmer, enters the assembly for the first time. Fed up with the rule of kings, weary of the voices of nobles, his heart turns from everything royal. He carries no crown, no army, no inheritance, only a voice. As he steps into the agora, the people gather, not nobles, not generals, but farmers, craftsmen, and shepherds, the men who feed the nation. And on this day, they declare that their bread will no longer buy silence, but give strength to their voices, voices that demand to be heard. The air is heavy with tension. For the first time in recorded history, the question of governance does not belong to kings, but to the people. This moment, fragile and uncertain, marked the birthday of democracy. Demokratia, the rule of the people. It was not perfect, it was not pure, but it was the first spark of an idea that would set the world ablaze. What if the greatest political idea of our age, rule by the many, did not begin on a city square, in a town hall, or in the blood of revolutionary streets? What if it began in heaven? Later, we will stand at Pilate's hall and ask, why did Jesus not condemn Rome? We will walk through courts and coronations and discover how earthly kingdoms echo a far older pattern. We will meet a spirit of rebellion that whispered, why must one rule over all? And we will follow that whisper to a place most of us never thought to look. Today we will discover greater mystery more than many realize. Democracy is more than a political machine. It is a spiritual language, a translation of ancient longings and ancient rebellions. It can be redemption, or it can be deception. It can liberate, or it can distract. By the end of this video, you'll see that the struggle for who speaks, who rules, and who is Lord is not just about ballots and constitutions. It is an argument about what it means to be governed. Later, you will meet a proud figure who dares to ask, why not many? Yes, we will ask a harder question. When the many speak, whose voice are they really amplifying? Part 1. Jesus and Rome. A silence that speaks history remembers the clash. Jesus before Pilate. The charges, sedition, upsetting the order. Pilate, the imperial eye, asks, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answers with a quiet that shifts the scene. We are told many things about that silence: humility, fulfillment of prophecy, a moral victory. But there is another reading, a political one, that demands we listen closely. Jesus seldom condemns Rome, not because Rome was spotless, not because empire was righteous. He did not rail, not because he feared earthly swords, but perhaps because condemning Rome is not the same as condemning the idea of kingdom itself. Later we will show how kingdoms, even corrupted ones, bear the imprint of a cosmic order. To demolish every earthly throne is not necessarily to dismantle the notion of kingship God himself ordains. Rome, for all its corruption, exhibited certain constants: hierarchy, delegated authority, law, a symbol under which people rallied. These patterns answer a human need. A kingdom, at its best, organizes responsibility. The oldest societies understood this. Someone had to take the heavy decisions. Someone had to be held accountable. When God speaks of kings and of a king, it is not merely illustration. It is symbol, a responsibility, and responsibility is a burden.
If Jesus had condemned every form of kingdom, he would have risked denying that the created order is capable of bearing authority at all, including the authority of God, the King of Kings. There is nuance here. To recognize structure is not to endorse tyranny. To recognize a throne is not to accept abuse. But Jesus' mission tended to correct, to recenter, to show where true authority lies. Keep this in mind. Later we will trace how a rebellion against singular rule became an impulse to break kings, and how that impulse eventually matured into the modern idea of power with the people. And so Jesus' silence is not surrender. It is a teaching, a patient refusal to collapse every throne into the same moral category. He confronts heart. He confronts hypocrisy. He refuses to confuse legitimate authority with its abuse. That refusal opens the door for a deeper question. What happens when the people decide that many voices should hold final sway? That question, the question of the many versus the one, is the hinge upon which our entire story swings. Pilate was slowly understanding this. That is why he asked, "What is truth?" He recognized in his corrupt state that a kingdom above must be upheld by truth, and truth is not the voice of the many. Part 2. Kings, Tyrants, and the Birth of Choice. Kings have been many things: shepherd, priest, judge, temple lord, conqueror. In the oldest texts, kingship often carried a sacred quality, an earthly mirror of a heavenly king. The people under kings saw order, they saw identity. But kings can also become the mirror of the human heart's worst ambitions. The cruelty of earthly kings would be the seedbed of an idea, the idea that a people might choose rather than inherit. That idea would later call itself noble, liberty, representation, consent. But its first breath did not come in a single heroic moment. It grew from many wounds and many whispers. Tyranny corrodes legitimacy. When kingliness becomes self-interest, the sacred surname of rule becomes a mask for greed. When royal lines tighten around blood and privilege, the people who must carry the cost begin to ask, why? Why should power be a birthright when it brings suffering? Out of oppression came innovation. The people began to value voice, not out of theology, but out of survival. If a king's power means my child goes hungry, then my consent becomes the coin that might buy relief. Small assemblies, councils of elders, popular councils, all appear at edges of empire where the weight of a crown becomes unbearable. This is where democracy begins to look less like invention and more like response, a pragmatic answer to injustice. If the one fails, give the many a say. One cannot reduce democracy to a single human origin. It is a compounded human story. The city that demanded a voice, the town that bought charters, the peasant who refused to be crushed. Yet beneath the municipal petitions and legal texts lies something deeper, a spiritual restlessness, a refusal to be governed by blood alone, a hope that we can choose leaders who reflect our humane desires. But every mutation carries unintended consequences. The habit of questioning authority, righteous when directed at abuse, carries a magnetism, the love of choosing for its own sake.
The appetite for voice can harden into distrust of any singular authority, even the authority of God. And this habit, the habit of elevating the voice of many, will soon meet an enemy whose tactics are cunning and patient, whom for the first whisper the voice of the many into existence. We will meet that enemy in the next section.
Part 3. The First Rebellion. Spirit of Discontent. Scripture and myth carry the memory of a first rebellion. A proud angel who would not bow. Call him Lucifer, Satan, adversary, morning star. Names differ. The image remains. A creature lifts the banner of I against the eternal Thou. He who was made to reflect glory demanded to keep it. He who was placed beneath one throne dreamt of many thrones. In that moment, creation learned that even perfection could fracture. Some call this story myth. Some call it metaphor. Yet tonight, we treat it as truth. Theological and psychological. For deep within creation, there arose a question that cannot be silenced. Why must one hold the final say? And that question did not merely echo, it altered the cosmos. What does pride look like politically? It is the claim that destiny should not be dictated from one voice, but many. The ancient rebel proposed a principle. If governance depends on obedience to one throne, why not redistribute the thrones? Why not elevate the we above the one? This promise gleams with freedom, yet beneath it lies a shadow, fragmentation. The many can unite. The many can also scatter. Notice the lineage. The spirit of discontent fertilizes a hunger for autonomy. It asks piercing questions. Why should one define good for all? Why must I obey if my will burns otherwise? These questions are not always wicked. Indeed, they are often the seeds of justice. They topple tyrants. They birth revolutions. But when enthroned as an ultimate principle, they harden into a metaphysic of dissent, a doctrine of resistance that can never rest. Here is the paradox. The spirit that first rose against divine singularity planted a pattern, a way of thinking that centuries later would blossom into systems named democracy, not by accident, but by affinity. For democracy too is born of impatience with singular rule. Sometimes holy impatience, sometimes rebellion's echo. To speak plainly, democracy is both remedy and rebellion. It can be the fruit of spiritual impatience or the answer to spiritual corruption. The same fire that liberates slaves can also ignite mobs. The same hunger that overthrows tyrants can enthrone new tyrannies. The tyranny of the majority, the tyranny of fashion, the tyranny of the loudest voice. Consider the word legion. When Jesus cast out unclean spirits, they did not say, I am one. They said, we are many. The plurality of voices can be a council of wisdom or a coalition of scattered wills. It can save a nation. It can tear one apart. Later, we will explore language itself, how words shape worlds. For even the word many carries double edges, liberating yet corrupting, creative yet corrosive. The wheel of history turns on these tensions. One versus many. Obedience versus autonomy. Unity versus discontent. Order versus freedom. It began with a question in heaven. It continues in the streets of men. Part 4. Democracy. The word origins and meanings. Words matter. Etymology can seduce. Democracy sounds straightforward. Demos, people. Kratos, rule. Rule by the people. But language carries shadows. Words take on life in stories, in sermons, in songs. They travel across cultures and centuries and pick up meanings that the original coiner never intended. Or is that really true? You have heard the spiritual shadow and see nothing exist by chance. But that democracy draws a spiritual lineage to the many, to the dark hosts. We will treat that as the provocative thesis of this video, that democracy, as a political form, bears affinities to the many in spiritual accounts of rebellion. Not that the modern word literally descends from demons, language doesn't work that way, but that the spirit implied by rule of the many and the spiritual idea of plural voice can be analogous, and this is not a coincidence. Expect this. We do not fully say that democracy is intrinsically demonic. Rather, it shows how an unchecked preference for many voices can eclipse the place of an ultimate authority, however you name that authority. It silences the nail of responsibility and blames it on the many. The voice of many leads only to relative outcomes. All answers is right, as long as it's the voice of the many. That is the truth. It hides ignorance in the shadow of open error. In a world that forgets God, the many may become their own idol. Democracy emerged from complex roots. The Greek city-states experimented with assemblies where citizens voted, but these experiments were partial, often excluding women, slaves, foreigners. Likewise, other forms of participatory government appeared in councils and guild halls across centuries. Each had virtues, and each had limits. This video's heart is not philology, it is diagnosis. Democracy can be noble, a god against hereditary cruelty. It can be a school for human dignity. But any system that elevates the many to the place reserved for the one can become a vehicle for spiritual forgetfulness. Why has democracy become so attractive? Because it promises agency. It promises that the voice of the people creates virtue. That is powerful, and that is seductive. The problem occurs when popularity becomes the measure of truth. When the standard of right becomes what most approve, virtue risks becoming relativism. Soon we will examine how cultural habits, once political, seep into education, law, and family life, and how those shifts reshape spiritual sensibilities. If Jesus did not condemn Rome wholesale, perhaps he refused to let the power of a throne eclipse the nature of true authority. If the ancient rebel asked for many, he did not invent a political system per se. He introduced a principle, the move from final, ordered authority to distributed self-determination. Human history has found many ways to express that principle, the most successful being democracy. Part 5. The ultimate purpose of democracy. What then is the ultimate purpose of democracy? The optimistic answer is simple: to protect human dignity, to build governments that answer to the governed, to create spaces where justice breathes and communities flourish. This is democracy at its best, not an idol, not an end in itself, but a tool. a tool designed to direct power toward service. Yet every tool reflects the soul of the hands that wield it. A hammer can build a sanctuary or shatter it. A sword can defend the weak or devour them. And so too with democracy. If the soul of a people is shaped by honor, responsibility, and a higher moral order, democracy becomes a guardian of flourishing. But if that soul is shaped by desire alone, by relativism, by addiction to choice for its own sake, then democracy collapses into theater, where noise masquerades as truth and preference is mistaken for wisdom. In its noblest form, democracy curbs the arbitrary will of kings, restrains corruption, and opens a road for conscience to speak. It builds checks and balances that protect the widow and the stranger. At its highest, democracy bows before something greater than itself, before truth, before law, before justice. For when a people root their decisions in wisdom and covenant, governance becomes more than machinery. It becomes sacramental, mediating order, delivering justice, preserving peace. But when a people displace the transcendent, when they enthrone human preference as the only absolute, democracy corrodes. Choice becomes the idol. Majority becomes morality. The good becomes whatever the crowd applauds in the moment. Anchors fray. The public square fills with clamor. And too often, the loudest voice drowns out the wisest one. This danger is not merely political, it is spiritual. For the spirit of a people shapes its institutions, and in turn, its institutions shape the spirit of the people. Soon, we will see how values, when neglected, bend the very structures of governance, and how those structures, once bent, reshape the soul of a nation. The purpose of democracy was never mere preference. Its purpose was always stewardship, a covenant of the people, deciding together how to tend their common life. The real question is whether we still know the difference between stewardship and appetite, between serving the good of all and pursuing the wants of the moment. A democracy rooted in transcendent truth, in law above opinion, in justice above popularity, can weather storms. A democracy rooted only in appetite collapses when the winds shift. The soul of a nation is tested not at the ballot box alone, but in whether its people believe there is something higher than the ballot box, something sacred, unchanging, binding. The ultimate purpose of democracy is not endless choice, but covenant stewardship. To bind ourselves to one another under truth, and to guard dignity with discipline. The tragedy is when democracy forgets this calling. The hope is when it remembers. Later, we will confront a question too easily ignored. Can democracy survive without virtue? And if virtue fades, what rises in its place? Part 6. Values, choice, and the habit of freedom. Values are the hidden architects of nations. They decide how a people will live long before laws are written. If a culture teaches restraint, reverence, and service, its politics will reflect that training. But if a culture teaches autonomy without responsibility, self-service without sacrifice, endless choice without limits, its politics will echo that pattern. The ballot box does not create values. It reveals them. Think of a child raised to obey, to honor, to delay gratification. That child will carry habits of self-control into adulthood. Now imagine a child raised to believe that every desire is a right, every impulse deserves indulgence. That child too will grow into a citizen, and the citizen will shape the architecture of state. The culture of the home becomes the culture of the nation. Satan, the adversary of order, the strategist of disorientation, does not always destroy by force. Often he disorients by scattering, by multiplying desires until discipline collapses, by addicting a people to choice until they can no longer endure obedience, by whispering that authority is always oppression and reverence is always weakness. Call him what you will: Lucifer, adversary, chaos. The pattern is the same. A society saturated in unbridled preference will find law fragile and obedience unbearable. This does not mean democracy and faith are enemies. Far from it. They can be allies, but it is a delicate friendship. A democracy that roots liberty in a higher law will flourish. A democracy that treats freedom as responsibility builds institutions that endure. But a democracy that roots liberty in consumer desire will not sustain itself. Its institutions will become marketplaces of preference. Justice becomes a commodity. Truth becomes an opinion. Freedom becomes an addiction. In the final moments, we will return to this word, choice, not to condemn it, but to redeem it, to remind us that freedom without formation is fragile, and that true liberty is not the absence of limits, but the embrace of right limits. So what must we do? We must teach virtue. We must honor responsibility. We must recover the story that freedom is stewardship, not appetite. A society that divorces democracy from moral order will not long endure. It may keep the name, but lose the substance. It may keep the forms, elections, courts, assemblies, but hollow them out until they are shells, filled with whatever winds the moment carries. Freedom is like a vineyard. Left unpruned, it grows wild, entangling itself until fruit cannot flourish. But disciplined by wise hands, it yields abundance. So too with democracy. Left to appetite, it becomes chaos. Guided by virtue, it becomes covenant. The habit of freedom must be taught. It is not instinct. It is discipline. To live free is not to do as one pleases, but to choose what is right, even when no one is watching. Without that habit, democracy is fragile. With it, democracy becomes more than a system. It becomes a stewardship of the soul. And so we return to the question, what shapes the soul of a people? For whatever shapes the soul, shapes the state. Conclusion: the argument and the choice. We began with a provocative claim that democracy itself carries roots in a spiritual restlessness, a move from the one to the many, from the crown to the crowd, from obedience to autonomy. We have walked through history's corridors, from Pilate's hall and Jesus' silence, through the arrogance of kings and the rebellion of angels, into the fragile promise of popular rule. Along the way, one truth has remained. Freedom is never free. It is purchased, and it is preserved. And now, the question turns to you. Will you let your voice be formed by tradition, by truth, by restraint? Or will you be swept by preference, by appetite, by
by impulse? Will you treat choice as an instrument of service or reduce it to an instrument of self? History is not a straight line. It is a conversation across generations between the one and the many. Democracy, at its noblest, is an answer to tyranny, but it cannot stand on its own. It must be preserved by wisdom, discipline, and reverence. We do not end the age of kings merely by scattering crowns. We begin an age where responsibility rests with all, and that requires the formation of the heart. If you seek a final verdict, here it is. Democracy is a mirror. It cannot create virtue, but it will amplify whatever it finds. If a people cultivate honor, it will amplify honor. If a people cultivate appetite, it will amplify appetite. The ballot box does not change what we are. It reveals it. So the real question is not simply who votes. The deeper question is, who taught them to want what they want? For in the end, the desires of a people shape their destiny more than the mechanics of their votes. And so we return to Pilate, the Roman governor who asked the question that still trembles across centuries. What is truth?
He who had ruled men with authority suddenly glimpsed something greater than Rome, greater than empire, greater even than Caesar's throne. He saw a kingdom not built on legions, but on truth. For the first time, Pilate looked into a realm that no democracy, no tyranny, no republic could contain. A kingdom ruled by truth itself. Pilate saw it, but could not understand it. He saw it, but could not embrace it. He glimpsed, just for a moment, that the true kingdom is not of Rome, nor of Athens, nor of ballots, nor of bloodlines. The true kingdom can only be ruled by truth. And in that moment, truth stood before him, not as a concept, not as a philosophy, but as a person. Here lies the paradox. Democracy asks what the people want. Kingship asks what the ruler wills. But the kingdom of God asks something deeper. What is true? Pilate's Hall reminds us that truth is not defined by crowds, nor secured by armies, nor voted by majorities. Truth simply is, and it is truth that makes us free. The ultimate question of democracy is not about systems, but about souls. Not about who rules, but about what rules within us. For the true kingdom is not found in Rome, nor in Athens, nor in any earthly throne. The true kingdom belongs to truth, and truth still stands before us, asking to be chosen.
We have come to the end of this very powerful topic. Let's have a short prayer. Father of truth, Lord of all nations and all thrones, we stand in awe of the mysteries we have traced, from the halls of Athens to the courts of Rome, from the whispers of rebellion to the fragile promise of democracy. You have shown us that history is not only written by men, but guided, tested, and weighed by you. We confess, Lord, that too often we mistake freedom for indulgence. Too often we enthrone our own desires and call them virtue. Forgive us when we let appetite drown out wisdom, when we exalt the voice of the crowd above the voice of your truth. Yet we thank you for the gift of order, the gift of stewardship, the gift of freedom rightly held. For every moment when kings defended the weak, for every assembly that gave voice to the voiceless, for every covenant that reminded us that liberty is responsibility, we give you praise. O God, teach us to guard our souls, for we know that the soul of a people shapes the soul of its state. Train our hearts in virtue, in discipline, in reverence. May our choices not be scattered like shards on the marble floor, but lifted as offerings of service, bound together by truth. Remind us that democracy is a mirror. It cannot create virtue, but it magnifies what it finds. So plant in us seeds of honor, of restraint, of covenant love, that what is magnified in our nations will be justice, peace, and dignity for all. And above all, keep our eyes on the greater kingdom, not the kingdoms of men, not the ballots of the people, but the throne of your Son, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, and the truth that Pilate glimpsed but could not grasp. May we not miss him as Pilate did. May we not walk away from the very truth that stands before us. So, Lord, as the ages turn and as nations rise and fall, let us be found faithful. Let us choose not only what is popular, but what is eternal. Let us live as citizens of your kingdom, even as we walk among the kingdoms of this world. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.